Now there's a concept in the search engine world called the long tail, and the long tail is the best. If I was in front of you guys, and there's a couple hundred of you on the call today, and we used to do these live. We had a thing called Rain Camp. We went around the country. But if I was in front of you, I would say, how many of you guys have heard of the long tail? And about 3/4 of the room would raise their hand. And I would say, okay, how many of you can explain the long tail to me? And then about 1/3 of those people would leave their hand raised. So let me try to explain to you what the long tail is as it relates to search. And I think the best way to understand the long tail is, for me anyway, is based on how Amazon sells books, and then I'll relate it to search. But basically, there are, in any given market, and we'll talk about book sales, okay? In book sales, there are about 30 to 40 books every year that make up 30% of the sales. If you think about that, I mean, there's, millions of books out there, right? But 30 or 40 books every year make up 30% of the sales, and those are going to be the best sellers. So in years past, those are, the Harry Potter books or the John Grisham books or Dan Brown books, right? These guys write a new bestseller, and it sells, a couple million copies, and cumulatively, those top about 30 books make up a bunch of the sales, okay, 30%. Then all the rest of those books, it's literally 99.9% of the rest of the books that are out there, cumulatively make up 70% of the sales, but any one of those books sells very little. In fact, it might sell 30 times a year, or 50 times a year, or 80 times a year. And so when Amazon set out to sell books, they said, look, we're not going to compete necessarily in the beginning on trying to sell the Dan Brown book or the Harry Potter book, because at that point, people would actually, if you wanted that book, you walked into your local Barnes & Noble or your local Border bookstore and you bought that book. But Amazon realized that there was all these other books that were selling out there, and what was happening is they were selling in like used bookstores all over the country, right? So Amazon said, well, we're going to stock those books. Now, Border couldn't stock all those literally all those millions of other books. They just didn't have the physical space for it. So Amazon started stocking and selling those books. And what you find is that all of those books that just sell 15 or 30 or 45 times a year, right, those books cumulatively make up 70% of the sales, which is a huge amount. And today you can't walk into a Border bookstore anymore because they're out of business. Okay, now something similar happens in search. Okay, and in any vertical of search, there's this same phenomena, which basically says, let's relate it to real estate. In real estate, in any one of our markets, there's about 10 to 15 phrases that make up 30% of the search traffic, and they have pretty high volume. So let's take Seattle, for instance. It'd be phrases like homes for sale in Seattle, Seattle houses for sale, Seattle condos for sale, Seattle real estate. Those kinds of phrases, right, get searched for a lot. But those phrases only make up 30% of the traffic. There is literally thousands and thousands and thousands of other ways that people search for real estate information and in your market, where cumulatively 70% of the traffic is out there to be had, but none of those searches are done very often. So think about, instead of Seattle condos for sale, somebody might search loft condos in Belltown, Seattle. That's a long tail phrase, the phrase loft condos in Belltown, Seattle. It doesn't get searched for as often, right? It might only get searched for 5 times a month or 8 times a month. But what happens is there's lots and lots of phrases like that in your local marketplace. And cumulatively, even though one phrase doesn't get searched for very often, cumulatively there's a lot of traffic to be had out there. Okay, so keep that in mind. Just keep this concept in mind, because it will really relate, especially, well, I'm going to show you some examples in a little while of really good types of things you can write about, okay? And then we'll really dive into this concept in greater detail in next week's keyword class. But you have to understand this idea that, look, with our blog, we are not going after those big head phrases like Seattle condos for sale. Okay, our blog is super capable of handling those long tail search phrases where any one of them doesn't get searched for very often, but the cumulative effect of writing about a lot of different things in our marketplace can have a substantial impact on our business, because 70% of the traffic really is out there to be had. Okay. So let's transition. We're going to talk about a few kind of fundamental things that need to be in your blog. So 200 to 500 words, and I'm actually going to go through each of these individually, but your posts need to be 200 to 500 words. And in fact, more recently, Google is starting to lean towards the more content you have, the higher likelihood it is that they will rank you. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit, okay? You can write, even today, it's becoming less and less the case, but you could potentially write something that has 100 words and Google would find it and maybe even rank it. But everything that we talk about in here today, there's kind of this balance between, okay, I can get it to rank in the search engines, but real people are going to land on this thing. And when they land on it, did I fulfill the query that they made? So if the query they made was, you know, how to get down payment assistance for a home in Seattle, can I really give somebody that information in 100 words? It's going to be really, really challenging. Okay, so we're always kind of saying, okay, we can get something to rank, but if Google decides to rank it and a real person lands there, are we able to actually educate them to the degree that they want to reach out to us in some fashion? Okay, so 200 to 500 words. We're going to pick a keyword phrase for the title. We're going to repeat that keyword phrase or that title at the start and the end of our content or our blog post. And we're going to use our keyword phrase 3 to 5 times. So we'll go through each of these kind of individually, okay? So pick a keyword phrase for the title of our post. And in an ActiveRain post, okay, whatever you use as the title of the post becomes the page title of that page on the internet. And the very first thing that a search engine looks at when they index a page, so their little spider lands on the page and they're about to crawl and see, you know, what's here, what is this page about, the very first thing they look at is the page title. And the page title on an ActiveRain blog post comes from whatever you title your blog post. Okay, so we're going to pick a keyword phrase. It's going to be the thing that we want to rank for. This is so important that next week we're going to do a whole hour just about this concept of picking a keyword phrase. Okay, but in our blog post, each post really has the ability to rank for one thing. Now I'll show you it ends up ranking for a bunch of variations of that thing or that phrase, but we really want to be focused on what is this kind of one thing this post is about. And any one post, or I have page on here because these same concepts could apply to pages that you build on your website, but any one post is going to be targeting one keyword phrase. Okay? Now, I put consider different variations on here because if you're like the lady earlier who said I have 700 blog posts, it's possible that you could go back and look at posts that have been performing well for you and consider kind of like if she'd done a post about loft condos in Belltown, Seattle, and it was doing pretty well, she might consider writing a subsequent post in the future that kind of changed those keywords up a little bit. So maybe it was Belltown, Seattle, loft condos, right? A slightly different usage of the same words inside of a keyword phrase. Now, geography and subject, I realize kind of the folly of having, you know, geography always in caps with the word almost in there. If your aim is to get your content into the search engines and found by people in the search engines, and that is literally the primary focus of the post you're writing, then you're going to want to have some geographical indicator in there. And again, we do a whole hour on this next week, but if you're just writing a post that's kind of geared towards your peers, or you're writing a post that's just good, solid information that maybe you were going to share in a newsletter, or you were going to share on Facebook, or maybe even share like with a specific client, you don't necessarily have to have the geography in there. But again, if the aim is to have it ranking in the search engines, there need to be some factor of geography in your keyword phrase that you pick for your title. And then there's this concept of geography plus subject, and this is just how people search, and especially as it relates to real estate, right? If you look at the vast majority of the search queries done in the real estate space, they're going to have some component of subject matter and some component of geography. So at a very baseline, right, those kind of top 10 or 15 phrases I talked about, the subject matter becomes like homes for sale, condos for sale, real estate, right? That's the subject matter. But they always have some kind of a geography. So Seattle homes for sale. In our example of, loft condos for sale in Belltown, right? The subject matter becomes loft condos for sale, and the geography becomes Belltown, Seattle, which Belltown being, a neighborhood or a community of the city of Seattle. So when we think about writing these things, and again, next week we will really dive into this concept right here that I have on the page, but the more precise your geography, the less precise you need be with your subject matter. So that means if I'm writing about a hyperlocal community, my subject matter can be very broad, like homes for sale. Homes for sale in, Deer Creek, Seattle, right? Deer Creek, Seattle is a pretty precise place. My subject matter can be very broad. If I want to be less precise with my geography, then I'm going to get more precise with my subject matter. Again, next week's class will really dive into this. I'll show you tons of examples of this. But when you're more precise with your subject and less precise with geography, that would look something like homes for sale with a basement in Seattle, right? I got real specific with my subject matter, homes for sale with a basement. In fact, I was just down in Dallas and I had a guy tell me, Tom Branch, he came to our rain camp 3 years ago or whatever it was, and he said the #1 post that he has on his blog is a post about homes for sale with a basement in Dallas. So this concept of geography plus subject will really kind of flow through into almost everything you're writing. And again, I'm going to show you a bunch of examples. Okay, so we've picked a keyword phrase for the title of our post. Now we're going to repeat that keyword phrase at the start and at the end of the post. The reason we repeat the keyword phrase at the start of the post, so you'll see in this example on the page here, this is a Google search result, and you guys have all seen these. Okay, I would imagine that at least once every single person on this call has Googled something. And if you haven't, it's a similar setup in Yahoo or Bing or any of these other places, right? You've got the part you can click on, which is the blue underlined component. That is those words right there, Riverwatch Condos, comma, Burlington, Vermont, in the second example. That is the page title of that page that we would go to, and that's based on the title of the blog post. Okay, the part in green, that's just the URL of the page. And on an ActiveRain post, the URL of the page is based on the title you give it. So in this case, it's activerain.com/blogsview/Riverwatch Condos, Burlington, Vermont, with some dashes in there, right, based on the keyword phrase they picked for the title. Then you see the part that's not clickable. It's the description. This comes from the page description in a blog post. And on ActiveRain, your page description is about your first 120 characters. And so you want to make sure that your title is somewhere in those first 120 characters of your post, right? And you'll notice, and Google does this, the words that are kind of highlighted are the words that match the query. So in that first result, like Catamount Realty Group is not highlighted. That was not a part of the query, right? The query was Riverwatch Condos, Burlington. And you can see all the words in there, and even in the page description, you can see how the word Riverwatch Condos, Burlington is highlighted, right? They're looking at page title, they're looking at page description to try to find content that matches the query. Now, I have you put it at the end of the post because it's a really easy place to get the exact keyword phrase in there as you work towards trying to get it in there 3 to 5 times. Now, I also do it at the end like that because I had a teacher once that told me, I think it was 7th grade English, you're learning how to write 5-paragraph essays, and they tell you, well, in the first paragraph, tell them what you're going to tell them about, and then you spend 3 paragraphs telling them about it, and then in the 5th paragraph, you tell them what you just told them about. So first paragraph, we use our keyword phrase because that's what we're going to be talking about. Then we spend a couple of paragraphs telling them about our keyword phrase. And then at the end, we tell them by using our keyword phrase what we just told them about. Okay, so like I said, we've got the first usage of it there, right in that first 120 characters, right in that first sentence, a lot of times right as that first set of words. right? Then we have our phrase at the end. So we've used it 2 times. Now we just got to get it in there 1 to 3 more times as we work towards using our keyword phrase 3 to 5 times in the body of the post. Now we used to teach this thing called keyword density, where if your post was 1,000 words, it would have your keyword phrase more often than if it was 500 words. It doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And I say doesn't seem to be because when Google makes changes, they don't send me an email and say, hey, Bob, guess what? We made a change today. Right? This is just based on things that we see and we watch, and they got people in communities like SEO Moz, they test these things and they run all these crazy tests. And so today we talk about just using our keyword phrase 3 to 5 times in the body of the post. And these should probably be in the reverse order, but the most important thing is, are you using the keyword phrase exactly as you used it in the title of your post? And if you think about that for a second, because let's use loft condos for sale in Belltown, Seattle, it gets a little bit challenging to use your exact keyword phrase 3 to 5 times in the body of the post if it's exactly as it was in the page title, because sometimes it becomes hard to actually have that phrase kind of flow in the rest of the content. Okay? But we can do it, and I'll show you some ways that you can do it. The first way is to have it in that first sentence and in that last sentence, because now we only have to get it in there 1 other time. Or, 3 other times if we're trying to get up to 5. And I would encourage you to try to get as close to 5 as possible. It needs to end up being the most common phrase on the page. And if you use it 5 times, it's probably going to be the most common phrase on the page. But I see times where somebody says, well, hey, can you look at this post? It's not ranking like I think it should rank. Why? And you'll end up seeing that they use some other phrase like the homeowners association or something else in there more often than the kind of that keyword phrase. And then this concept of does the body have similar content? And here's what I mean by that. Well, if you were writing about loft condos in Belltown, Seattle, and this is one of the reasons that blog posts rank so well in the search engines, is if you were writing a post about loft condos in Belltown, Seattle, what other kinds of things would you expect to see in that blog post? Well, you'd probably expect to see things like, parking spaces, homeowners association dues, open kitchen floors, or open kitchen plans, square footage, number of bedrooms, all these kinds of words and phrases that relate to the keyword phrase. And Google is so smart today that they can look at an overall piece of content, and based on what we tell them it's about, which is the keyword phrase we use for the title, they can look at all the rest of the words and the phrases in there, and they can figure out, does this all make sense? Like, does it make sense that this person's talking about square footage if the post is about loft condos in Belltown, Seattle? Well, yes, obviously it makes sense. And if you're writing something about loft condos in Belltown, it's going to make a heck of a lot of sense, the other words and phrases that you use in it. So it's almost impossible not to have that other similar content in there. This is something I've never really talked about this specifically before in this particular class. But when you write something on the internet, when you write a blog post, I really want you to think about, is the piece of content you just produced, like literally, is it the best piece of content out there for what I've just written about? And when we get in and I give you some of the examples, you'll start to see that you could probably be the person producing the best piece of content for the types of things I'm going to suggest that you write about. But you literally have to, because Google is getting so good at understanding the value of a piece of content, and there's a lot of ways they do this. I mean, they're literally looking at layout, white space, just from a formatting perspective, but they're also looking at things like when real people land here, how long do they stay, right? And that's indicative of how high quality the content is, right? They're also able to look at, we talked earlier about 200 to 500 words, but I said the longer the better, because Google understands that a lot of these things that our clients are querying can't adequately be explained in 200 words, right? I mean, if I was writing about a condo building, like a particular building, it would be really hard for me in 200 words to give somebody that was querying that building all of the pertinent information that they'd want to know, so that they walked away saying, man, I know everything there is to know about the Plaza del Sol condos on Capitol Hill. So I really want you to think as you write your content, there's not a formula to this, right? I mean, it just becomes looking at what else is out there on the topic and kind of comparing what I've written with what else is out there. You know, it becomes a matter of looking at it and saying, man, if a real person lands here, like, would my piece of content educate them to the degree that they might actually want to pick the phone up and call me, or they might click through to some other, some link I've given them to find the actual homes for sale in this area? Like, really think about how valuable that piece of content is. All right, so I want to go live for a second, and I want to show you guys some examples of content that I think that you should be thinking about writing. And I'm going to do it from the perspective of like condos and subdivisions, and some of the posts that we see on ActiveRain that get the most traffic, and it's literally month after month after month, are these posts about condo complexes and subdivisions. So, or a townhome complex, or a set of row houses, or these very specific places in your marketplace. We call these kind of loosely hyperlocal posts, right? They're posts about very specific things in your marketplace. And so this is a look at the back end of ActiveRain's Google Analytics, and this is for the last 30 days. Okay, so May 6th through yesterday. And this is based on the word condo. So these are all different kinds of searches that people have done, right, with the word condo in the search. And we see these kinds of, the Village Condominiums, Fort Myers, Sunwood Condo, Shelton, Connecticut, Versailles Condo, Newport Beach, Brookside Condo, South Windsor, Connecticut. We see all of these searches that are being done about very specific places, like the Mateer condos for sale, the Mateer Towers condos for sale. These are what are called long-tail searches, okay? They're not done in massive volumes, but if you think about cumulatively, like this is in South Windsor, Connecticut, the Brookside condos, I would be willing to bet there's a bunch of other condos in that area. So while this one condo was only searched for 6 times, the cumulative of all of those condos out there in that marketplace and the way people search for them, it starts to become a lot of traffic. And one of the things I didn't talk about as that long tail slide was up there is the more specific somebody gets in their search query, the closer they are to actually taking action. So the person just searching condos in South Windsor is going to be less likely to be buying a condo than the person that searches Brookside condos in South Windsor, especially if it starts to have things in it like we saw here where they're saying, Mateer Towers condos for sale. I don't know what city Mateer Towers in, but let's say it was in New Orleans, right? The search New Orleans condos for sale is giving us a less likely transactor than the search Mateer Towers condos for sale. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, and I want to show you how this really starts to come to life when you look at a specific condo complex. And so this is the Aspetuck Village condos in Shelton, Connecticut. All right, and I guess you would call this like the long tail on the long tail. Because what you have here is a phrase like Aspetuck Village, Shelton, Connecticut, or Aspetuck Condominiums, Shelton, right? This phrase is searched for 7 times, and again, it's just in the last 30 days. That's very long tail, right? Like those 7 visitors would not save my business. It would not add a ton of value to my business. But when you start to really look in here and really drill down on all of the ways somebody found a particular post, look at some of these. Aspetuck condos for sale in Shelton. So I would ask you, who would you rather have on your web? And if you've done anything with internet leads, like I would rather have this one visitor on my website than having 10 visitors on my website that just said condos for sale in Shelton. This person is, in the research we did when we owned our own brokerage, this person is 2 times closer to buying than the average person looking at condos for sale. And that person doing condos for sale, they're out there on tons of different sites, and they're looking, they're on Realtor.com and Zillow and Trulia, and those are the types of sites that show up for those big head searches anyways, right? this searcher right here is much closer to actually buying something. And just look at these, Aspetuck Village Condominium, Shelton CT for sale, Aspetuck Village Condos for sale, Stratford. Like, there's just all these really specific searches in there that even though they're only done once, look at how many of them are done once, and look at how many of them really focus on somebody looking to transact very soon. So we come in here, and this is Aspetuck Village Condos, Shelton CT. Okay, here's one of the search queries, and we'll see. This is actually Barbara's outside blog. So this is the same piece of content that shows up here on her ActiveRain blog, but notice her pictures showing up here. Okay, that's one of the things I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. But if we were to click on this post, it brings us into a post, and now we can kind of look at it, and you can start to get an idea of how some of those concepts that I talked about apply to a real post. Because what we have here is we have a keyword phrase for the title. And now I don't know why she has Huntington in quotes there. She knows her market, so she knows why she did that. Maybe the town used to be called Huntington and now it's called Shelton, or some of the locals refer to it as Huntington. I'm not sure. But that's her keyword phrase. Then we see her repeat her keyword phrase. Okay, it's right there. And then if we go all the way down here to the bottom of the post, we'll see her use her keyword phrase again, so she's got it in there twice. And then we try to find, like, is there another use of this keyword phrase in here somewhere? She gets really close right here with her link. Aspetuck Village Condo for sale in Shelton. See, so, it's not exact, but look at the rest of this post. Like, is there a bunch of content in here that relates to the keyword phrase? Of course there is, right? And so she just kind of gives us flowery description, right? What's this area about? Well, it's desirable, and it's artistically arranged, right? And then she talks about the units, or I'm sorry, then she talks about the complex. Then she talks about the units. Then she talks about the amenities nearby. Then she talks about where it's located. Then she talks about homeowners associations. Right? Then she gives us a video if we wanted to take a video tour of the area. Then she gives us a map of exactly where it's located. Right? That's a pretty darn good post in terms of if I was a consumer who was interested in this area and I landed here, would this give me a good idea of what's going on here? Let's go look at her traffic on this post. And you can all get to your traffic if you're on your My homepage. On the left-hand side, there's a link for traffic. Now, this is an older post. Okay, it was written in 2010. This post has had 5,000 clicks on it. What that means is 5,000 times, and I've probably been 50 of those, using this as an example in various classes over the years. But 5,000 times, this post has been loaded in somebody's browser, right? And we saw, 37 times that somebody loaded this post based on a whole variety of kind of different, unique ways that they use this keyword phrase or variations of this keyword phrase and found this post. So one time, like one post, she's gotten business from this. Like I've talked to Barbara, I know Barbara, she's gotten business from these very specific posts. She gets calls, she gets people clicking through the link to head back to her website to find condos for sale or rent in that area, right? That generates leads for her. But one of those wouldn't have been kind of the end-all, be-all, right? She would have wanted to have had a bunch of these, and so I mean, so here's another one, Sunwood Condominiums or Sunwood Condos, Shelton CT, right? She comes up right here, and if we look at her post there, we're going to see a real similar kind of layout, real similar, right? So she's taken a formula that works for her, and she's done the same thing for multiple posts, for multiple complexes in her area. She's done this with subdivisions, right? And she's really just covered her market to a degree that, she didn't just do it once, right? It's this cumulative effect where this post has 5,000 views in the last almost 3 years. This post has 2,500. This post has 1,800. But altogether, those posts are giving her a lot of traffic every month. And they're very specific to real estate. Here's one that I kind of came across, and this is, I guess, an example of a way you probably shouldn't do it. And I want you to notice something about this post right here. This post is as good today as it was the day she wrote it. I call this evergreen. This post is evergreen in the way that when she wrote it back in July of 2010, and these 37 people found it this month, the content's still good, right? Here's an example of a post that's gotten a bunch of traffic over the years. Bogue Shores condo for sale, right? Bogue Shores condo for sale, and you'll notice that it's down here, okay? And the reason it's down there is because when we look at the post, it doesn't do the things we talk about, which is pick a keyword phrase, utilize the keyword phrase 3 to 5 times, and we're going to have some more things I'm going to talk about here in a minute that it doesn't do. I want you to look at this post has gotten, for this person, 3,500 clicks. Now, think about the difference in what the outcome could have been for this blogger if instead of doing this just kind of listing, if they'd done a post like Barbara did that talked about the Bogue Shores condos, really focused on the keywords, had gotten that thing, you know, ranking in the 2nd or 3rd or 1st position instead of in the 7th position, and it had been an evergreen piece of content that was as good today as it was when they wrote it. And instead of just talking about one particular listing that once it sells has really no value for the person landing there, if they had done something where they give them this evergreen piece of content with a link out to the current homes for sale, right? This person's missed 3,500 opportunities to educate consumers who were looking for not her specific condo that was for sale, but was just looking for, you know, condos for sale in Bogue Shores. I talked about this idea of, okay, so I'm going to, in the homework that we're going to give you today, there's a link to what's called our blogging blueprints. And our blogging blueprints teach you how to write a post like this. So here's an example of somebody. This is Katrina Benton, and she's kind of become my new superstar because she's one of these ladies that just leads drive her business. And for the last 2 years, the only way she's gotten leads is Craigslist, and she decided I want like some things that are a little bit longer term where I don't have to every day go in and update the Craigslist ad. And so she started creating these very specific types of posts. This one's about the Brookshire condos for sale in Anchorage, and she's followed our blogging blueprint plan. Okay. And so in the blogging blueprint plan, she's got, restates her keyword phrase, she's got a link to find similar condos, she talks about the units, right? And I really want you to look at what's in here. I mean, it's evergreen stuff, right? This isn't going to change a bunch. I mean, maybe in a year or two, these average price ranges change, and she can come back and make a small little update. She talks about the homeowners association. She talks about what's going on nearby. She gives you some additional avenues to get more information about the community. Right? This is a really solid post. Like, somebody landing here is going to get good information out of this. Let's look at the back end of hers, because this is where she hasn't been doing this very long, okay? Only the last couple of months. But, she's got posts in here that have 300 views, 250, or clicks, I mean. So clicks, this is how many times this post has been loaded in somebody's browser. Look at these posts. River Edge Condos, Cedar Hollow Subdivision, right? What does that one look like? It's a real similar thing to the condo complex post, right? She's just giving you all the information about the subdivision. And again, we'll give you guys links in the kind of homework we have. We'll have links to these blueprints that teach you how to write a post like this. But let's look at, she's definitely picked a keyword phrase. She's utilized that keyword phrase 1, 2, and somewhere down here at the bottom, I'm sure she's got it again for her 3rd time. And it's probably Cedar Hollow Subdivision Homes in Anchorage. There's a 3rd time, right? She's got it in there 3 to 5 times. She does a really good job on this page of kind of getting those real fundamentals. Okay, let's talk about some other kind of commonly missed opportunities or additional things that we can do to really enhance the SEO on that page. The first thing would be photo metadata. And like, huh? What does that mean? Well, every time you add an image on ActiveRain, you have the ability to give the image an image description and a title. And the image description becomes what the search engines see that photo as being of, right? Now, they're getting better at just being able to look at a picture and know what it's about, but we want to tell them specifically what it's about. So like in this case, this post was about the Crossing Townhomes community of Mesquite, Nevada. So the title of this photo, which was about, you know, was a photo of the Crossing Townhomes, probably like the entryway or something to the townhome development, right? The image description needs to kind of relate to our keyword phrase. That doesn't get looked at as content on the page other than it describes the photo, right? And we get a couple of 100,000 visitors a month that land on blog posts after doing like a Google image search. So you want to make sure your image description tells the search engine what the photo is about. The title becomes a part of the keywords on the phrase, and when somebody hovers their cursor over a photo, the title is what will pop up at them, and that's another opportunity to get the keyword phrase on the page. So if you were only able to get the keyword phrase on the page, let's say 3 times, because it just didn't feel right to try to stuff it into the content an additional 4th or 5th time, your images can be a place that you can get that title on there a 4th and a 5th time in this title section of your image, right? So you've got an image description and an image title. Description becomes what the search engines see it as being. Title becomes another opportunity to get the keyword phrase on the page. We're just trying to send as many signals to the search engine as we can that the content here is related to that keyword phrase that we use for the title of our post. This is another opportunity to do that. An anchor text link using your keyword phrase. What is an anchor text link? Well, anchor text is just the words that our link is created out of. So what are the words that a person clicks on, right? Those words are the anchor text link. So in the example on the screen here, the anchor text link I use is, it says Loft Condos in Belltown, Seattle. So what would have been the title of my blog post? Loft Condos in Belltown, Seattle. Right? And Katrina Benton is such a good student, and so I love using her post as an example here. But look at, okay, so here's the first use of her keyword phrase, right? The second use of her keyword phrase becomes the anchor text link. And you notice she doesn't use words like click here as a part of the link, or, you know, like she doesn't use this whole phrase as the link. She just uses the keyword phrase to create the link. Cedar Hollow Subdivision Homes in Anchorage. And she actually got an extra word in there, so I would have either told her, don't use that word, or use it in your title. Okay? But her anchor text link matches her keyword phrase. In our third class in this series, we'll talk about where does this go. Like, this is going to go back to a page on her website that actually has and I don't know if that's my internet slow or her website slow. This is going to go back to a page on her site that actually has, you know, homes for sale in this area. Like right now, there's literally one home for sale in this subdivision, and that's it, right? But it gives that consumer a chance where if they find this post 6 months from now or 3 years from now, they're still going to be able to find the currently available inventory in that area, right? Because her IDX keeps this thing all fresh and clean and always has the new listings in here. So that anchor text link using our keyword phrase is you have to have this link in there, right? And it needs to be pointing back to your website, to a place where you can show them listings as it relates to your, you know, what you were talking about in your post. We'll really dive into that in week 3. This is another example. I used a live example. This is from a demo post that we do, and this is actually one of the posts that you'll have access to from your homework for those blogging blueprints. Okay, add an H1 and an H2 header tag. And when we come back and we look at her post here, she has an H1 header tag on this piece of content, but it's something you can only do from the HTML. And I believe Carrie has a link that she can send you that teaches you how to do this, how to add H1 and H2 header tags. But if the idea of HTML, like where I've got those little, less than sign, H1 greater than sign, if that stuff, because if you've never written a blog post, you're probably looking at this going, oh my goodness, he is getting to the point where my eyes are starting to roll. I don't know what the heck he's talking about. Forget this. Okay, do all those other things we've talked about, which I know you're capable of doing. This is something you can learn after you've gotten the basics down. But this is another potential to add value to the post in the eyes of the search engines. Header tags are just reinforcement of what the page is about, right? So some of the reinforcers are, titles on our images, keyword phrase for the title, it's the page title of the blog post, the page description, which comes out of that first 120 characters, right? These are all kind of things that just, again, we're lining everything up for the search engine, so when they look at our page, they say, okay, I know very clearly what this is about. There's good content on here, and I want to return this as a result to Google's customer, which is the searcher. Additional media-rich content, and this used to say and layout, and I'm not sure why I took and layout off of there. Anyway, additional media-rich content, so think about things like YouTube videos. Like if you have video, or if you're doing even like slideshows, I mean video would be better, but if you have YouTube video that relates to the area that you're writing about or the thing that you're writing about, get it on the page. Google owns YouTube. Right? So one of the reasons you get it on the page is because it kind of lines up another thing, right? And we noticed in Barbara's example here, let's go back and do that Aspetuck Village, Condos in Shelton CT. When we did that search, right, her stuff's coming up here, but if you notice a little bit lower, her YouTube, this is her, Barbara Altieri, her YouTube video also shows on page 1. So now she has 1, 2, 3 of the spots on the first page, okay? And within this content is also her YouTube video, right? So it's another signal to the search engine. There's great stuff on this page. And she, of course, tagged her YouTube video with a bunch of stuff related to Aspetuck Village, right? I mean, look at the title of her YouTube video. And then this is a tour of Aspetuck Village, right? So that kind of data, Google knows about that, and it knows that it's sitting on this page, right? That's helping her. Another thing this does is when a consumer lands here, how long is this video? You guys aren't going to be able to see. So it's about 1:30. Google, if the consumer spends the minute 30 to watch this video, they stayed on this page for that much longer, which sends a signal back to Google saying, you gave me a result that I really liked. In fact, I spent a bunch of time here and I watched this video. Okay, Google Maps. That's another one. You have the ability inside of Google to create custom maps. Embedded forms, content to download, these kinds of things that maybe keep people on the page just a little bit longer as another signal. And again, this is all about these signals that we're sending to the search engine. I keep saying that, but we want them all to kind of line up, right? People stay here for a while. The content on the page is good. It's all related to the same thing. One of the things, I don't remember changing this, so that's really strange. Layout is something I don't have on here, but one of the reasons we give you these blueprints, and she does a good job in here, the layout is very important, okay? And I'm talking layout like the white space around your images, the spacing between, having these headers in here. These kinds of things are important because when a consumer lands on a piece of content, you want them to understand this is professionally produced. And there's little things that over the years, people that get paid to make sure that CNN lays out right so that when someone lands on CNN, they want to dive in and read the story. Things like white space, headers, clear paragraph breaks, these kinds of things, like font that's not crazy, like you don't have red, yellow, and purple font. The formatting is important, okay? And I believe that Google is getting even better at looking at like the HTML on a page and understanding the formatting. So just you know, pay attention to what your post looks like when you're done with it. You know, and maybe, you know, this is one of those things where if you haven't written a bunch of posts to begin with, right, our blueprints give you kind of good layout for these kinds of posts, but layout and format is important. I believe it's becoming even more important as Google's really trying to get rid of like spammy content or even spammy looking content, right? They want to know a real person created this with the idea that a real person was going to land on it. Okay, Google Authorship. I'm not going to put a picture on this side. This is so important. I just want you to focus what's on the page. Carrie right now is going to give you guys that link. She's chatting it out to you as I say this. ActiveRain.com/Google-authorship. This will teach you how to set Google Authorship up for your ActiveRain blog. And what this will do, I had done one of these. I don't want to, okay, let's do this one. Because, again, I use her because she's a very good student, but what this will do, see that? See her little face on there? That's what that will do. Google Authorship will add your picture to the results. And what we're starting to find, and if you look at this result, you'll see a couple of folks have their photos here, and this one doesn't. Having your picture in Google results is allowing lower results to get higher click-through rates. So it would not surprise me at all if either one of these two results was getting a higher click-through rate than even this first result because of the Google Authorship. What this also does is it starts to allow Google to understand that, like, look at all these posts here. Am I still logged in as Katerina? I think I am. Or Katrina. When we look, see all these, she's written like 30 or 25, about 75 posts, these real specific sorts of posts. Google knows she is the author of every one of these posts. And what starts to happen is over time, as she continues to create this awesome content, Google continues to look at her and build a profile of her as an author. This is becoming, look at this. I mean, any one of these things that we do searches on, she comes up, right? And her face comes up, right? So Google's starting to understand who she is as an author. This is ultra important. If you've written 700 blog posts, there's people who have written 30 or 50 or 500. If you haven't done this, literally when we get off the call, this first thing you need to do. This Google Authorship is just, it's ultra important. And it's becoming even more and more important from an SEO perspective, not only to allow Google to understand everything we've written, right, and give kind of a profile, because they're starting to identify with Katrina as an expert in Anchorage, right, and in condos in Anchorage and in subdivisions in Anchorage. But it also puts our picture on the page. Like, Google doesn't change their search results pages very often. In fact, if you were to go back 3 years from now, literally the only way these pages look different is these pictures. And look how, I mean, literally look how glaring that is popping out at you in terms of what a Google search results page looks like. There's nothing else on the page that has their picture on it, only her face. Okay? Now, in some of the searches like this one we saw as we got down here, you know, they've got this kind of thing, and the page looks a little different. There's a video, and right? But that photo and that, you know, that ability to show Google who you are, ultra important. Okay, so what's next? Well, get a Rainmaker account, or these concepts apply to WordPress or Blogger or you know, really any of the blogs out there. On a WordPress blog, there's some extra things you have to do in order to get all of these things kind of set up and running well, and there's these SEO packages that you got to stick in there, and you're all capable of doing this, I believe. ActiveRain, we make it a little bit easier, okay? We've got, you know, we do this. Like, we set these pages up for you. You know, when you know that when you title of blog post, that's going to become the page title. It's going to become the URL. It's going to, you know, we try to make these things really easy for you. We give you these blueprints. We do classes like this. So we'd love if you would consider a Rainmaker account if you're not already one, and I'll give you kind of a promo here in a second. Create a list of 10 blogs that you'd want to write, right? And think about it. Like, do you have subdivisions in your marketplace? Do you have condo complexes in your marketplace? Do you have townhomes in your marketplace? Do you have these kind of real estate things in your marketplace? And I'm going to ask you to write one post using what you've learned. Now, Carrie's going to come on here in a minute, and she's going to bribe you to write more than one post using what we learned today. But you have to write, like, you just spent an hour. You just hopefully not wasted an hour. But if you don't write something very soon, you will have wasted the last hour, because you're not going to 5 days from now sit down and remember the things we talked about, even if you took notes really well. This stuff is fresh in your head right now. You got to find some time to get that first one done. I'm going to ask you to sign up for next week's class, and then use this checklist, and in the homework that we're going to give you at the end here, and we're going to email out to you, we include this checklist. Okay, but this is just the stuff that I talked about today. Right? Pick a keyword phrase. Use it in the first 160 characters. Use it 3 to 5 times. Right? Make sure it's the most common phrase on the page. Give your images proper, you know, have an anchor text link. Maybe add a map or a video if you have one. Share your posts on social media. That's not something we talked about today, but it never hurts. All right, so if you're not a Rainmaker, at this point, so if you're not a Rainmaker, we have a promo, arpromo.com/June 2013. That'll get you a Rainmaker account for $29 a month forever. Okay, let's go in here and see. Carrie, are you there?
Hey, Bob. Yeah, thanks for letting me come on real quick. I just wanted to, hi, everybody. I'm so happy you're here, first of all. I know in the beginning many of you wrote in saying that you haven't written any posts at all, so this is definitely the class to get you started. Bob said that the most heavily found posts are the hyperlocal posts on ActiveRain, right? The neighborhoods, the subdivisions. And I really need that to sink in, because we had a member, Pat Kennedy in DC last month, received 4 leads just from her hyperlocal posts. 4 leads came in because she wrote a post about a neighborhood or a subdivision, and you all can do this. So, since I want that same success for you, you're fresh off this class, you have the tools. Bob keeps saying homework, but it's actually called action items. Oh. I like the sound of that better. In that, there's blueprints, there's an SEO checklist, there's all the information you need. You're going to get an email shortly after this class with all of the links and a recording of this class. For any of you that write a hyperlocal post and you put in this group that I'm about to mass chat you, you're going to get an extra 500 bonus points for up to 5 posts. So you're a new member to ActiveRain, you want to climb that leaderboard, here's a great way to get 2,500 points. Help your business, put everything that Bob taught you into play, and let it sink in. You can do this. Consumers will find you. Keep it up, and one day, maybe months from now, but you will get a phone call, I promise.